You're listening to IBNX. IBNXradio.com.
Good Sunday afternoon and welcome to Dynamics of Dialogue. I'm your host, Rebel Queen, and me and my co-host deliberately are here to tickle your intellect and tackle some critical issues along the way. We've got guest co-hosts, good music, and some great conversation. Stay tuned for some dynamic dialogue on IBNXradionetwork.com.
Hey, D of D group. Today, hosting is deliberately, so you're going to be shocked. I'm going to let you know ahead of time. I'm nervous, so I'm probably going to screw this up a couple of times, but I got my girl, Rebel Queen, with me, and she's going to help me through. I put my handicap parking space tag up in my car, so help my ass today. Hey, Rebel, you want to say hey? Shout out?
Good afternoon, everybody. This is your co-host, Rebel Queen. We got deliberately in the seat today, and I'm so proud of her. I'm so excited. She's going to get in here and kick this thing off. Today, we're talking about pick your medicine, life coach or therapist.
That's right. So one day I'm watching television. Actually, I'm watching what everybody else watching. What's that girl name? Iyanla Fix My Life.
Yes.
So I was like, damn, why everybody need their life fixed? You know? So I called up Rebel Queen on the phone. Explain to me the difference between a psychiatrist,
yes,
psychologist,
yes,
therapist, and I say therapist / counselor,
yes,
and a life coach. So we went in, started having this conversation, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to have to do a little research on this. So today's topic is basically about the research that I did on this subject. So life coach has started becoming so popular in our new millennium world that everybody is becoming a life coach, basically, or at least getting a life coach. I was listening to the book by Angie Martinez. She's a radio host out in New York, the Voice of New York. And she said she was going through some depression, stuck in a space with her boyfriend. So her friends introduced her to this life coach. Granted, she had friends, but she still needed to get this person that was a life coach to actually show her that she had got it, I guess, in a rut in her relationship. So my thing was, how do we know that that wasn't a situation for a mental health profession versus someone that's a life coach who really don't have the same credentials as someone that even with just going into counseling or therapy.
Correct.
This is basically an individual, and I don't know where, technically you could have started anywhere with this. But anyway, what we're going to do, we're going to go to break, and then we're going to come back, clear our heads, come back, and decide when do you pick what and when, what time, whatever. We're going to get everything rolling.
That's right.
listening to IBNX. IBNXradio.com. The station with the best music. Best music.
I love the music.
Best music.
Hey, what's up? It's Jay-Z.
Hey, I'm Mariah Carey.
Hey, it's Katy Perry.
It's your boy T.I.P., man. Get in. It's your boy Sean Kingston.
What's up, y'all? I'm Beyonce.
This is Nicki Minaj, and I'm in the mix with...
Listeners, attention. When I give you the command to fall out, I want you to fall in on those yellow footprints with your head nod straight forward. You understand me? Because you're listening to Dynamics of Dialogue on IBNXRadioNetwork.com. Your dynamic, your dialogue.
Hey everyone, this is deliberately back with my co-host, Rebel Queen, and we're back into our conversation, Pick Your Medicine. So let's start with Iyanla. Watching this show, we see her going in, helping people, giving them advice on different things. But let's just start with her. She started back, and I remember in the early 90s, maybe late 80, 89, something like that, motivational speaking, writing books. And that's when everyone was like, Iyanla, you got the latest Iyanla book. She was motivating people. I get that. Then somewhere, I'm assuming Oprah read one of her books, picked her up, decided to give her a shot. So now she's on this huge platform, worldwide, everywhere. And she even admit a couple of things went down. Hair got big. Oprah kicked her off. And so now she's back at zero, divorcing, broke. Is this who the fuck is this we gonna let tell us what to do? Because even in the height of her career, Rebel, she still failed.
But you know, failure is a part of the process.
True.
Because the only way we'll never grow, we'll never expand beyond what we are while we're in our comfort zone. So we have to fail. I was just reading, I had an experience, I've been going through a couple of things over the past few months. And in that, I was reading Rumi. Rumi is this poet that, his work, between him and Khalil Gibran, they're like Bibles to me. And in Rumi's work, there's a line in his poem that says, "The wound is the place where the light enters." So when you go through stuff and you fail and you're at your lowest point, that's where you have the opportunity. Either you're going to stay there, or you're gonna grow. You're gonna get something. Yeah. You're gonna get part of that enlightenment that you need to kind of get to the next place. Sure. Now, but I think you and I have the same challenge with Iyanla.
Yeah, where now, don't get me wrong, I watched the show, and some of it is so good, but some of it, when you're watching this show, you're saying to yourself, and you should be, these people don't need to be on TV. Right. Especially the one that show that started this new season off with the young girl who was kidnapped at birth. I don't remember her name, but she was kidnapped at birth. They bring her on the show. Well, she was kidnapped at birth, found out that she had been kidnapped, I think, at like 16. Then her mother that raised her, the one that did the kidnapping, goes to jail for her crime. Now she's still calling this lady mother because that's who she knows as her mother. But then she actually have a mother and father that birthed her. Right. Her roots. Right. And so this was a huge conflict for her. And on the show, we watch her get so angry. She goes off. It was probably one of the the biggest. This outthrew anything I've seen on Atlanta Housewives. And in that moment, even before then, I just didn't think this was something that needed to be that Iyanla handled. This is a child that needs therapy, a lot of therapy, and perhaps medicine. So I don't even know at this point a counselor would be okay with her unless she was seeing a psychiatrist who can actually prescribe medicine along with the therapist.
Well, I think, and here's another challenge with that. So I agree. I think that, in mental health, the face of mental health and how it looks and how patients are treated, that has changed over the last several years. So now typically, most primarily, we'll see a psychiatrist doing medication management. Yeah. Most psychiatrists are just doing medication management. And but so in a case like this, I do not believe that a life coach, somebody that has been through that kind of trauma will have an identity crisis there. Yes. And that's not appropriate for a life coach. And so this article and part of the research you did, was it David Lay in his article on Psychology Today? I agree with him. A life coach should not be stepping into that space because therapists that's years of study. And then after the study, there's practicum. Yes. They have to spend time with people before they can even begin to practice.
and you have to keep your credentials up.
And you have to keep your, well, and see, and here's the thing, and the other thing, the challenge that I had with David Lay's article, because he's talking about life coaches, coaches, recovery coaches, and peer specialists, as though we're all in the same bucket.
Yeah.
And that's not true, because peer specialists are credentialed in the form of a certification. Correct. That has to be kept up, and that is monitored. Because they work for state agencies, they're agents of the state. So because they work for state agencies, they have to follow all of those guidelines. Their work is actually billable. As a CPS, our work is actually billable by Medicare. But we're, some of the misconceptions, we're not.
See, I didn't know that either.
Yeah,
I didn't know it was billable.
Our work is billable as a CPS and a CPS parent. Those who can work with families, that's billable by Medicare in the state of Georgia. But now for coaches, that's different. I don't
completely.
That's
different.
Outside of that realm of
They don't have anything that they're actually working up under. They're actually working for themselves. They can be LLCs. Although can a peer counsel, because you have to be regulated.
Peer support specialists in the state of Georgia, anything, whatever peer services that we're offering, we have to do that within the setting of an agency. We have to be employed through. It has to be through the employ of an agency.
Other than the motivational speaking that Iyanna has done, I went out there and looked at some of her stuff. I didn't see her connected to anything that she had to be regulated. I didn't see where she was a life coach, where she was certified, even at the lowest level. Wow. The life coach is at least taking some classes. None of this. All of this is basically they're bringing these people on. Now, I think she was great for when the prisoners were on there, and that was last season. She had they were no longer prisoners, some men that had been in jail for murder, and brought them on the show. I believe it was 4 of them, and they had to accept who they were, what they did, how their past affected them versus what's going on right now. Right. So that was cool. That was good. It was good, great television. I enjoyed it. It was 3 parts. She brought in another guy from California, had been to prison for himself for murder. He spoke with the gentleman. They come back and they followed up on him, and they're doing well. That's great. But when you have people on here with issues that start crossing the line, in my opinion, I don't think that even as you're making money off your television show, some point of this, I think you should draw a line, especially if you want to keep your brand on, I'm helping people and I'm doing this.
Well, I think that brings into the question of moral concerns, ethical. I think the concern is 2-part. There's an ethical concern and there's a moral concern. So I think that if you're a person, like for me, as a peer specialist, as a person, I think there is a moral concern that I know if a person is approaching me looking for a certain type of help, or if they're looking to kind of go into a place that I know morally and I know ethically, this person doesn't really need me. This person needs to see a therapist because they're going to need, like that. And it's not necessarily that everybody needs, because honestly, medication doesn't fix you. Medication only makes it more bearable for you to tolerate the symptoms while you go through this process. It's not the medication that fixes you. There's still other things. Now, for some people, medication may be absolutely necessary. They're just not able to come around where they need to be.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I was watching was Married to Medicine, and the Dr. Heavenly, the dentist. She's seeing a life coach for anger management issues. And even on the show, she have these huge outbursts. I don't know if that's a life coach issue. It may or may not be, but where does that come from?
I think for some people, and it is difficult. I think because an anger issue definitely lies, it's something that's internal for you. I think it's deeply internal to a person. I think it has a lot to do with their ability to cope with some kind of underlying factor from their past. It may be an underlying frustration. Like I can identify, I think most of us aren't able to identify what those frustrations are, so there comes these outbursts of anger. Yeah. For me, I can identify, where those things are that frustrate me in that way. Yeah. I do have a life coach, and I also have a therapist. I think for me, what I see for me, I see a balance on both sides. I see where absolutely the therapist can help me address those underlying issues, the roots of trauma that generates the pain. but then the life coach can help me address. I'm engaging more on a public level.
Yeah.
You know, and so I've got to be able to navigate that. I've got to be able to navigate that successfully, and I think in that regard, a life coach can help you.
And I get that. So with the anger management, with me, I take Paxil, and I have I started off on Prozac. I've taken because I had these anger management issues, and some of it also was hormonal. So my my general practitioner talked with me and actually sent me to a psychiatrist, and this has been years ago. I was actually living in Pensacola at the time, so they started me off on a medicine, and it helped a huge. I mean, it really completely changed my life around. But some of it was things that had happened in my past, trauma, childhood trauma, and then some of it was also just hormonal. So whenever that time of the month would come around, I was a raging murder. I mean, literally, it was dangerous.
That's a thing.
It was. It was really
thing.
dangerous. So that's something that a life coach for Donna would not be able to fix.
Right.
I don't know if that's the same thing with Dr. Heavenly, although she's had some of the same outbursts that I've had. So I just don't know that. But life coach actually, so one thing I want to look at is life coach actually started in business. Mentors basically were life coaches. I definitely believe in mentors. I've had them for every position that I'm in that I've had. You started off as one because I wanted to get to this place. When I wanted to get to the next place, I would get another life coach. I mean, or mentor.
Right.
But they started in business.
Right.
And what they were doing were motivating but we have to remember when they started in business, they were probably educated business people that's helped motivating you to your next level.
Yes.
Not someone who now you never met, because more than likely you know these people on some type of professional networking level.
Yes.
Even with your life coach, I believe you know them on a networking professional level.
We were I was working with her. She's the executive director for one of my former colleagues, and so we've had plenty of interaction, and
And to me, that makes it different.
Yes.
Because now this person has gotten where they don't, what is life coach, the mental health professional has the experience when you walk in the room to sense your demeanor. When I used to be a social worker, they gave a class just on handwriting that we had to take because everything about us is going to seep into our core and we're going to push it out.
You need to analyze my handwriting. I want you to analyze my handwriting.
That's been so many years ago. I probably say all kind of shit in there.
Yeah, go ahead. You know that's gonna be fun. Okay, I'm sorry. That's gonna be fun.
But so you're being trained to do this. So a lot of therapists and counselors started off social workers, but they have an array of experience. I don't know about.
Because I know, and I can say as a person that has received therapy, I know from looking at the notes, which I've eventually got. So from looking at the notes, I know that they pay attention to your affect, how you're dressed, with your everything. They write all of that down.
Everything, and that's why I said I don't know really if that's something a life coach actually do. But guys, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish discussing how Rebel Queen. With me, I'm just giving research. Rebel is, I told you she's preachy, so
whatever.
All right, guys, we'll be back. Thank you.
What's up? You are listening to Dynamics of Dialogue on IBNX Radio. It's your dynamic, your dialogue. It's Mad Queen of Mad Queen Media.
What's up, y'all? This is Frida Love. I want you to join me on Sundays from 1 to 3 p.m. with Dynamics of Dialogue, where the art of conversation creates something special on IB.
Hello, everyone. We are back. So I'm back with Rebel Queen, my co-host and my higher than BFF, and we are actually talking about pick your medicine, basically. Hey, everybody, pick your medicine. I want to say this too. This is something a little off topic, but everybody is always talking about this camera right here showing your butt. You guys can't see it. And I am so pissed off. I wore something today that wasn't going to reveal my booty. And I'm in the host chair. I'm like, damn, this the day I could have put this ass on display.
It's not on that. It's not on that camera.
Done ass
It's
on
not on that
display today. I messed that up.
I don't think it's that camera. But my disclaimer, I told them I was going to talk about it. I know, they look so offended.
Yeah.
They're just like, look.
Well, I don't mean to offend y'all, but I had a chance. This is a missed opportunity.
They're going to get a whole new set of what grown women is like because they
ain't offended back here.
I'm
telling you.
Traumatized back there.
I know.
But I'm telling you, that was not my decision to play that R. Kelly. I told my engineer, don't play it. I told him,
I just like happy people. That's all.
Happy people.
I really like happy people.
For your medicine, huh?
For your medicine.
Then they could have been happier had they seen my ass. Right there. Y'all? See me? Anyway.
See, look. They just died there full hour.
Shit, this is an ass that needs to be seen. Y'all got me messing up my topic. Now my ass gonna be on everybody's, I need a life coach for my ass. Cause I'm raw. My ass is raw.
Your ass got a zip code. Your ass.
Shit, put this ass out there. Hello, ass.
No, can we talk about look, like I got the nerve to talk, right?
We back here. So back to life coach. So one thing we wanted to definitely stress that being a life coach is unregulated and not monitored. The only thing basically to be a life coach, you can go from working at Publix as a cashier in some rain boots to taking a class that's going to give you, it's going to touch on certain subjects. So there's, first of all, it's so unregulated that even the training is different.
It is.
It
is. And I will say this too, as a CPS, and I don't know if this is a challenge or not, like, for me, but as a CPS, even for that, it's a certificate. Well, here's the thing. Another thing is what makes you, and I need to clarify that, a CPS is a certified peer specialist. And so there is a distinction between a peer specialist and these coaches. A peer specialist, it's not credentials that make you a peer specialist. It is your lived experience. So in David Lay's article, where he talks about when he compares the recovery coaches to the 12-step programs, I think there are some similarities, but in this regard, I think that the training to be a peer specialist around how to engage other peers, I think that could be a little bit more extensive than what it is.
Can you kind of give us because I never really asked you this before. So what all do you do?
So the peer. So again, what makes you a peer specialist is a person that you've come along in your recovery, and so recovery is we know that you don't necessarily. A diagnosis can stay with you forever, right? So it may never go away, but how you cope with it and your quality of life is what can change. Your understanding of what it is can change, and that's what a peer specialist can help you. So say, for example, a person that may be struggling with managing their finances. Sometimes maybe a part of their diagnosis is they have fog and confusion. And they may have challenges with, oh my God, I forgot to pay this bill, or I paid this bill twice, that kind of thing. So a peer specialist like me, if I've been through that, I can help them with tools that I've used to figure out that kind of problem. And so a peer specialist doesn't create for you your future. They help you figure out what it is you want to do.
And basically kind of tell you where they were and maybe give you the tool, not the tools, but the people around you that you should engage. Would you say something similar to that? So.
I would say it is about having people around you to engage, because you're encouraged to develop a network of people, people that when you deal with certain conditions, like maybe a person that has anxiety. other people that don't really deal with it as frequently may not understand what a person goes through when they deal with it. So having friends that deal with it, you don't have to explain. It adds another layer to your friendship. Where you don't, it's more like a support system. So it's not so much that the peer specialist is giving you, it's more we're supporting you.
Supporting,
Yes.
So that's
So the goals for a peer specialist, for the goals come from the peer, and we just help you figure out how to.
And see, a life coach is definitely, they actually giving it to you. So remember
That's
when
a
we had that
difference.
conversation,
Mhm.
even to the point of you can do KPIs or key performance.
Another business term.
Yes, another business term, and that's because it came from the business. So the same thing when we would go and you get your what is it when every year to get your raise or whatever you do your
Performance review.
Performance review. To me, it's kind of because you set up your goals. And then you go through and you see which ones you hit. You know, how did it impact you? You go through all of this, and you basically being scored. Because even in some of the training, they even suggest that you score these individual. And yes.
Wow.
So, but with that said, it's even with what you do, it's still being regulated. And we're in Georgia, so by the state of Georgia, you still have to.
You have to take, in the CPS training, we had to learn how to document things appropriately with the appropriate codes for Medicaid, again, because it's a Medicaid billable service. But that gets billed. Like I saw one thing where they talked about people engaging in collection activities. Peer specialists, at least in the state of Georgia, no peer specialist is ever going to engage another peer on finances in terms of collection activities. That's just not the space we live in because, again, we're working through an agency. And even if it's after hours, like during the daytime, you can, interact with a CPS through behavioral health facilities. And then, if, people can access a CPS after hours through the Georgia Crisis and Access Line. And they get dispatched on the ACT teams, the crisis teams, with a therapist, with a licensed therapist.
And see, that's why for me that it became such an issue because it's a career path that is straddling two
sides of the fence.
So in business, if I want to get a certification, now this started in business, but in business, when you want to get a certification, I have a PMI, Project Management Institute, so I have a PMP, and it's done through PMI. Believe me, you have to fill out this long thing online. They actually go in there. They check your background. They go in on everything that you put in projects. They want as much information. And then if they do not get enough information, they will audit you. Why can't we do this for a life coach?
Yeah, see, but it's because there's no, and the reason why is because I think we need to understand laws. Things like this get put on the scope for laws and legislation when people see that it's a problem and begin to engage. And the challenge is, right, a lot of times, to engage your legislators, their sessions, most of their sessions are held in the daytime. They switch. Getting the calendar, I'm going to tell you, getting the calendar to get those to get into those sessions and, see when they're supposed to be, getting that calendar is sketchy. So it's a challenge, but it can be done, and there's lots of people that do it.
And why it should be done, one of the biggest things, so when I was doing my research, I think I was pissed off just because, you and I talk so much and we're always talking about mental health. But now they're actually going in and I have it. Their life coaches are actually specializing in depression.
See?
Shouldn't touch it.
Shouldn't touch it because especially considering that depression is, I believe, I could be wrong, and I should have an accurate number on this, a number one cause. It's like one of the leading causes of suicide. Depression is so dangerous. And I think that people, again, normalize it. See, what happens is that I think people, they hear about anxiety and they hear about depression. There's a difference. Everybody experiences anxiety and depression at one point in their life. But when you experience those symptoms for 6 months or more, then that's when they begin to consider this more of a clinical issue. And I think at that point, maybe for something situational, a coach can help you. But something clinical, something that's long-term, that's dangerous because now if you're a person that's suffering with depression and you have suicidal ideations and your loved one is seeing a life coach, what recourse do you have when that life coach takes that person off the rail?
And then is your life coach communicating with your psychiatrist
Exactly.
who's prescribing you medicine
Exactly.
that you can't get off until a medical profession take you off. Remember, it's a lot of medicine like that. That's a conversation you and I have had.
There are medications
because you
that
had
you
to tell me about an anxiety medicine that was given to me.
Right, and because they're absolutely in therapy, psychotherapy. Well, not psych therapists. I believe it's psychiatrists are the ones that can write, and I think there's the pharmapsychologist that can write prescriptions. But yeah, for those drugs they do, there's lots of them. Well, it's not even those. It's really primary care providers, I think, that are the ones that are prescribing those benzodiazepines. A therapist can be the one that can say to you, hey, that's not the type of drug that you want to just stop taking abruptly, because that can kill you.
Yeah, definitely.
But a life coach probably, is not going to have.
With some of the stuff life coaches are doing, I can maybe see there is a part that they can play in that. For depression, that was one that was really important to me, because I really don't know where they would come in on that depression, unless, like you said, it was less than 6 months. Something like what Angie Martinez said, where she was just depressed, but she was more or less depressed just because she was in a horrible relationship.
Right, right.
That individual
and
helped
that's
her
more
get out of
appropriate
it,
for a
and
life
she
coach.
didn't need her anymore.
Yes.
And the next thing, they're actually into recovery.
And so recovery, now that's the interesting thing, because for me, I consider myself a person in recovery. And unless you are a person that has actually been, again, having come from my former position, working in recovery, if you're not a person that hasn't had that experience, then I'm not quite sure how it almost defeats the purpose of you being a recovery coach, because that's the point. It's your lived experience is the point.
They definitely should not be there in the beginning of your recovery, because sometimes to get, depending on, like, say if it's alcohol or drugs, you need other things. Methadone, you got a methadone clinics, you got those type things. So,
yeah.
And with the healthcare laws, I know here in Georgia, we have a lot of free addiction recovery centers. So maybe a life coach could definitely come in at the end. So once you've recovered, and maybe you gain felonies or something like that, and you can't get your life back on track, I can see maybe a life coach
can help in there. Yeah,
maybe with that. The other thing is, I was really confused on this, because I don't know sexual identity. People who are having a harder time identifying with their sexuality or even their sex.
That's gonna
how
I think I can see perhaps a life coach, even a life coach. It's such okay. So here's the thing that's a double-edged sword. Part of the reason why we have peer specialists, a class of peer specialists in the first place, is because of the difficulty with clinicians. But I guess what we'll do is we'll talk about that more when we come back from break.
Yes, definitely, everyone. So we're going to go to break and listen to a little music, and we'll come back and finish giving you what we feel you need to know. Thank you.
You're listening to IBNX, IBNXradio.com. The station with the best music. Best music.
I love the music.
Best music. Hey, what's up? It's Jay-Z.
Hey, I'm Mariah Carey.
Hey, it's Katy Perry.
It's your boy T.I.P., man. Get in. It's your boy Sean Kingston.
What's up, y'all? I'm Beyonce.
This is Nicki Minaj, and I'm in the mix with
IBNX Radio. You're not listening to Word of Mind Radio, then you're seriously missing out. Hosts Trey Grizzy and Nine Ether share their perspectives on everything from social issues that affect our communities to relationships and trends that affect us all. Guaranteed to teach you something new. Word of Mind is engaging.
The only way that we can do this.
Yo, guess who just pulled up and they ain't by themselves? Who? Zebo.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Club So Def. Come on and put your hands together. Come on now, yeah. We have special guests in the house tonight, all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. So Def's platinum recording artist, Escape. Give it up, y'all. Come on now. Yeah.
phone. I know you're right there listening. I've been paging you all day.
Hey guys, we are back. So we're back, and we're asking, well, not so much asking, but we're saying, what is your medicine, basically? So we left off actually talking about what life coaches are now getting into. So now they've started specializing. So it's just not that person that's going to motivate you. It's also that person that's going to try to, if you're depressed or in recovery or sexual identity. So Ty, what you think about life coach? Used to work at Publix in some rain boots and a T-shirt and red beret.
Yeah,
took a certification.
I think that in order to really coach somebody, well, okay. I mean, I understand there's a clinical perspective to it because there's lots of things that can surround, sexual identity, because lots of it, I think, is related to people that have those types of issues. Lots of times they've been through things, I've learned through my past employment, they're the traumas they go through as youth. They have the adversities that other kids, they get put out of the house just because of their sexual orientation. And that changes everything, Yeah. So I understand there's that. But so I think in some areas a life coach can help. But I think, I don't know, still at the core. I mean, I think it depends. I think it's so interwoven because I think it depends at the core of what the person is dealing with. Yeah. Because their issue may not be them. It just may be them in society.
Yeah, so that I agree. So
yes.
If it's just telling your parents you're gay or even telling your parents... No, I think when it gets to the transgender part, I don't know about that.
I think
unless it's at the end where now you've decided what you are and how do you react at your job.
Yeah, I think sometimes from some people I talk to, they're okay with that. They know who they are, but their struggle is being accepted in society and finding their place in society and coping with other people who have aggressions towards them just because of their sexual, because I think a lot of us don't think about that in that way.
So I want everybody to know I'm not down on life coaches. I'm not. What I just do think that I think a life coach is great, especially when it was in business, because that's where we were all exposed to mentors or life coaches. I'm not down on life coaches. What I think that a life coach really needs is it needs to be regulated, and it has to be training across board, the same training, or at least across state. So if I'm living in Augusta and I choose this program, and then I live in Atlanta and I choose a different program, these are two different people in the same state, and they're getting different exposure.
They're getting different exposures.
I don't think that's right.
And also, I think there comes a danger because I know what I've spoken about. I used to watch that show, Iyanla Fix My Life, and when I stopped watching, was in that interaction with DMX and Iyanla, and the thing that I took away from that, here's what I understand. My understanding is that his diagnosis, at least one of them, if there's more I don't know, is bipolar, and I felt that I felt that he was agitated, and that's not like a fault to be bipolar and be in an agitated state. True. That's a symptom. True. And I felt that she was triggering him. She was using very she was just
admitted that she triggered
she
people.
Was provoking him, right? But see,
definitely.
and then so for me the issue is, you're a life coach, and if you're a person that is giving care to anyone with any diagnosis, you have to be cognizant enough of that diagnosis to know how to interact with that person. Be sensitive to that.
With the training that I looked at for life coaches, certifications, none of them went into really just in-depth information about diagnosis. They really don't.
Right. And see, and I didn't like that because he totally got demonized for that thing. But and again, and I'm not taking I don't mean to take the responsibility off of him.
True.
Because each of us have that responsibility for how we interact. But then it's a different thing when you go into a place that you perceive as a safe place and you get attacked. And you're not prepared for that. That's different.
Yeah. And so now earlier when we spoke about life coaches, we were saying how, before they started in business, you knew the person, probably worked with you, or at least in your network.
Right.
Okay, so why can't just a good girlfriend? We talk all the time. why can't a good girlfriend or a good group of girlfriends, why aren't they like your life coaches? That's not enough that I need to go out and get this life coach?
I think that sometimes it depends on who your friends are and the set of circumstances that they deal with.
True.
Some people, I know I have some people in my life that like to use me as a life coach, but I'm still getting my shit together. I am, I think I'm great at a lot of things, but there are a lot of things I still suck at. A lot of areas, it's where I still have to learn, and grow and develop. So I'm not equipped to carry anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not equipped to tell somebody your life should be this.
Yeah.
And
then another thing. So like, we picking these life coaches, but what about we have motivation, because before the life coach, they got into our lives and told us how we had motivational books. So even I think I own one or two. Everybody own motivational books. Is that a life coach?
Everybody don't own motivational books, girl.
You don't own motivational
I own
books.
motivational books, but everybody does not own
because truthfully, you can get something out of those books.
Oh yeah, you can. I love those things.
You can get some things out of those books.
You can.
And because we are women of color and we both grew up in the church, went to church, and have our basis.
I didn't even grow up in the church.
You didn't grow up? Oh shit, that's a conversation.
Black girl.
But what about the pastor? Because
Yes.
preachers, bishops, whatever they call themselves now, and they are people I ain't even apostles, whatever you are, I don't know, but you go to your pastor for stuff. Speak to pastor.
But
your
see,
marriage counselor is the pastor.
Yeah, but see that they gotta have. But you know what? Again, and it depends on the crowd. It depends on credentials, because I know I've been to a church. I was going to. I don't want to shout out because I'll be cussing now on the radio. and it's Easter Sunday. But I know I've been. I know. I've been to churches here in Georgia where they actually have a whole ministry for that. So people are not going to directly to the pastor, and in that ministry, they actually are pulling together people that are church members that have credentials. They're licensed counselors.
Okay,
that's beautiful.
Now
that's beautiful. Yes.
What I'm not for is, sorry I'm pointing at you, what I'm not for is all these pastors with this doctor title, but you got that damn
Reverend
title.
Doctor.
You a doctor.
The right
and
good,
you
the good
did not
righteous.
go. You have no PhD, no doctrine, period. That is something that you.
Meanwhile, you
come
worried
from
about your
some
marketing.
made-up church.
You worried about your marketing, and you posting videos on Facebook with your head on people's titties, talking about what you like.
Hey, that is my pastor. They
like
keep
what
talking
the
about
world?
Thaddeus Matthews, the cursing pastor. Y'all know I love him.
Yeah, I know.
I don't take him serious. He is funny to me.
Yeah, he is funny.
I
He
would
is
not
funny.
go to him for spiritual
guidance.
He couldn't guide me.
He got me to
he
hell.
said that
He got me in the hell.
Big breasts and big booties. He guide you right up in the bedroom.
That's what I'm talking about.
Take him
Yeah,
serious. But a lot of people do take their pastor seriously.
They do.
They really and truly do.
They do.
And they go to these people and they're giving them, they're giving them scriptures mostly. And, like I told you, it's times that I just play this game. When people post out there about Joel or T.D. Jakes, I can go out there and find stuff in mythology.
Yes.
That was said how many years ago?
And ultimately, they're not scriptures. People, and that's the damaging thing, because it's like there's a lack of critical thought that we have, because we acknowledge openly that I believe it was Timothy that was a doctor in the Bible. So we acknowledge that this man was a doctor, but then in the days of Christ, but then we expect just people to just heal based off of the word alone. Yeah. And there are things that are not really covered in the Bible. There are things, case in point, rape. In the Bible, because I've looked, right? All I can find is when it refers to the rape of Tamar, it just simply says that she was desolate for the rest of the days of her life.
They have rape in there, and that's when, remember when they, but they lifted. Remember when the angels, the people, they let the angel in, and the people come by there and wanted to drag him out and beat him.
But I'm talking about
his women out.
I'm talking about in terms of how that rape affected them.
Oh, yeah,
right, and the only thing I can find that even references that is after hers, it was just she was desolate for the rest of the days of her life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So it takes beyond that. It takes something a little bit beyond that. So I don't know. even the church, I don't think is a perfect solution. I don't think that even clinicians, like the point I was going to make before break, is the whole entire reason why there is a peer workforce in the first place is because there is some level of areas where some clinicians are not necessarily culturally competent. And I don't mean I don't mean to drag them, because after working, with some of them, I see them passionate. Some of them struggle with not being able to help their clients. Their people they see, their patients. They struggle with. I mean, the struggles that they have with losing a patient can often make clinicians suicidal. Yeah, and I think that people don't realize that those people really go through some serious changes. But on the other hand, in the course of solving a problem, and I'm guilty of that. In the course of solving a problem, I get so focused, I forget about niceties. I forget about human interaction. That's why you have a peer workforce, because we're ones that we have that lived experience. All clinicians don't have a diagnosis. Yeah. So sometimes, a peer specialist, and it's always working, whether you're at a facility, you're working in the conjunction with a therapist. If you're on an ACT team, you're dispatched with a therapist. You're not just working on your own, and you're not charging people on your own and making it your own business. That's different.
And then I think it also helps because that individual the peer specialist can also speak to you from where they were. Yeah. So the mental health profession may not have ever experienced that. They just have education and, talking, their experiences may come from other people that they have helped or given advice to. So the peer specialists I definitely think they hold a definite place in our community for us getting help.
I found that there are lots of clinicians that do have a diagnosis. And the most disturbing thing to me is to find that a lot of them in their own field, if they reveal it, then their credentials come into question. And that's the heartbreaking part. Yeah. Because some of them have the potential to be that. But because of the stigma within the field itself, they can't. Yeah. And then and another thing that I want to say, because like I said earlier, before we went to break, and
it's not that I am against life coaches. I just want them to be regulated. I want some, training across board, because in our community, in the Black community, sometimes we don't even go to the pastor, because in our community it's about secretive. Yeah. You don't talk your business really outside the house. That's right. So in church, a lot of times we don't go to the pastor too, just because in church, we're there because remember that's what we do. Our stunning at. We're there to be, respectable. We want to be ladies. We don't want to be, we don't want you to know our husband is a drunk or he jumped on us Saturday night. Or our children, our daughter pregnant, or our children are this and that, so we don't even go to the pastor. So I think in some instances, maybe if these life coaches are trained correctly, we can maybe start off with a life coach. And because they are less expensive, well, I guess if you add your insurance.
Yeah, because insurance should cover.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. So they would be more expensive. But even if you get the life coach or recommended to get a life coach, maybe they can direct you to get additional help, because a lot of the times we do not talk in our community.
And so that's a point to focus on then, because that. For that to be a concern, that means that someone that's an arm that needs to be taken up. That should be regulated. Yeah, it should be regulated.
Definitely. Yeah. And then another thing with the life coach, when I was going through my research, I found out, and I think everybody should know, I found out that a lot of mental health people have life coaches. The thing is, they know how to use them correctly.
Right. Because I've just working with these folks. I have seen the stress that they work endlessly, and it was very eye-opening for me, because even for me coming into, after having my break and having to work with therapists and doctors, I had a lot of anger because some of them did a lot of awful things. Yeah. But then after working and seeing it from a different perspective, I just realized this is a really complicated, complex thing.
It is, because our mental health affects everything.
If you don't have your mental health I'm going to tell you, if you don't have your mental health, you have nothing. And it's a crazy thing because, like I said, it was so hard for me to talk about it for years. But, you know, you don't know what it's like when we are so accustomed to push, and we ignore past all of these things.
Yeah,
and when you get to that place where you're actually you don't recognize things, you know, you can't think straight, you can't make sense out of what is going on around you. That's it's scary, and it's something that we need to address, and stress in our lives absolutely affects that.
And I definitely think finding someone to help you in your life and finding guidance is very important. And it's just how we choose to do it, how many of those people we choose to have in our life. Of course, the mental health professionals, like we said earlier, they have insurance. They're going to pay for those things. But, you know, some of us don't have insurance.
But you know what? And I'm so glad you said that, because even if you don't have insurance, like at least I know in Georgia, if you have no insurance or, you know, you're unemployed, you can get treatment at the community service boards. In all of these counties, when I went for a period where I had no income, I was able to get help, and it cost me virtually nothing.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we are going to discuss the pros and cons of getting help. You ready for that, Rebel? Yes. Am I doing okay?
You're doing great. I'm so proud of you.
What's up, y'all? This is Most High. You listen to the Dynamics of Dialogue on IBNX Radio Network. Your dynamic.
Y'all, this is Seletica of ISM Culture, and you're listening to Dynamics of Dialogue with Rebel Queen on IBNX Radio.
Hey, what's up? It's your girl M Love, and you are tuned in to Dynamics of Dialogue on the IBNXradio.com network. Peace.
You want me to talk?
Welcome back to Dynamics of Dialogue. I got deliberately over here.
Mess it up. I was like, huh? What? I was waiting for, guys, you know where I was with that? I was waiting for a network break. I'm looking down at the paper waiting for a network break. But we are back. So the pros and cons of choosing, basically not choosing mental health professionals, the pros and cons. And this is something that when I was going through doing the research, and I sent that over to you, Rebel Queen.
Yes.
One of the things that, so some of it is just you just going to think about it. And and then some things you don't think about it. So one of the first things I read it about the ethnics and boundaries. So because life coaches and pastors, so I'm going to say this is not for peer specialists, because I do think they have to do the ethnics and boundaries. But the other two, pastors and life coach, they do not have to fall under that ethnical boundaries. So with you in your training as a peer specialist, is that is something that you guys cover?
We absolutely have a code of ethics, and it does prohibit us from having personal, particularly intimate relationships with people that because I noticed in David Lay's article that he mentioned one of the things that he didn't see was that kind of boundary where a coach couldn't have that kind of thing, I guess because it's not regulated. But for us, we definitely have a code of ethics. I should have brought in my CPS book that has a whole list of all the things that we should and should not be doing. I could probably pull my devices there. But you can find out what a peer specialist is in Georgia by visiting www.gmhcn.org, and there's a tab going down the left-hand side of the page, and you'll find out about CPSs and the CPS project, and you can click there and find out all about it.
Have you ever been so do they have a list of the people that are peer counselors? How do you find one?
Well, see, the thing is that, again, because we're not individual, we are more practitioners in the sense that we're working through an agency. You will find a peer specialist going through an agency, usually either a state agency or a state-funded agency. You can also find, again, a peer specialist. When a person in Georgia is in crisis, they can call the Georgia Crisis and Access Line, and they can speak with a licensed therapist. And when they actually do dispatch somebody to your home, it is usually a licensed therapist along with a certified peer specialist. Even in that case, they're not being dispatched alone.
That's a lot to think about. I hadn't thought about that too. Another thing that, and I think this is big, they I'm assuming, and I don't really know how this works, you probably do abandonment. So I looked this up. Mental health providers, if they feel that they may cross the line on some things, or if they feel they can't take you, they're bound to get you the help that you need from someone else, a different professional. Whereas, of course, your pastor does not have to do that. They can kick you out of church tomorrow. Nor does a life coach. They have, so they can, if you don't pay them, you still owe them $75 from your last visit. They can just cut you off. Whereas mental health professionals cannot. What about peer specialists? Can they abandon you?
Well, again, so the peer specialist is working through an agency. So while a peer specialist isn't intended to work with a person for an indefinite period of time, because that's their job. You get paid through the agency to go out and do this. And it doesn't mean that you're working at the agency all the time. They can go out in the community, but you're not going to abandon them. You just going into it, there's an understanding that it's going to be for a specific period of time, or I guess however, according to whatever the need and the plan is, how that would work. So it's not going to be the same.
And when I was even looking through the certification for the life coach, none of these things were actually, well, one of them did. One was mentioned one of the certifications, but it was one of the more expensive certifications. And they did talk about abandonment and you know, just leaving someone, or how to go about releasing them from your help or your center or whatever it is. But I didn't realize until I started looking up information about abandonment, and especially if that in mental health, where you can really damage them.
Absolutely.
Where make things worse, and then even add to their diagnosis.
Add to the trauma. Add to actually the way your experience, especially early on, can definitely damage a person with all the people that you interact with. And the peer workforce is just one of those solutions to that problem. But again, even the peer workforce is not the end-all solution, because even as a peer, I've had trauma in my life. And because I've had to understand it for myself, it's a little easier for me to recognize signs of trauma in the people around me. Whereas opposed to all CPSs don't recognize that, because everybody doesn't have the same experience.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So there are different types of CPSs. There are CPS. There's a CPS youth that works with people that are younger. Yeah. CPS parent, people that works with families and with children and these complex, incredibly complex issues. There's forensic peers, who work with people that come through the criminal justice system, because they have that lived experience.
Okay.
And then my understanding is that there's even a new type of designation they're working on. I don't want to say what it is yet, but I know there's more that they're working on. But so everybody is not, they don't have the same life experience.
True.
So just because a person is a CPS doesn't mean that they can help everybody in a particular, so it's like the whole thing. It's just complex. And there's not a simple answer at any of it.
Yeah.
Nothing simple at all.
You're right about that.
Yeah.
And I mean, because like I said, when I read that article, I was like, what? The other one is confidentiality. HIPAA.
Yeah. Now,
HIPAA is extremely important.
HIPAA is extremely important, and it's the way we think about it. You know, one thing that used to really blow my mind is, and I'm glad I've heard it addressed. You ever notice how you're in a neighborhood, and you ever been somewhere in the neighborhood and you see a van pulling into the neighborhood to pick somebody up, and on the side of the van it says something about a mental health center?
Yes.
Now you telling the whole community that person is there to get mental health services. You're picking that person up. You know, but I've heard that discussion that they realize, wow, you know what? Because they realize HIPAA is that. I mean, so peers are absolutely bound to HIPAA. Everyone.
But life coach or not, nor is your pastor. And they could spread your business. And I mean, even if you have a life coach and you're just talking to them and you give them a certain amount of information, they could, not trying to be messy because they're still people, you know, they could come home from a hard day of work and tell somebody, their husband, friends, you know, I just talked to my client, whatever, and they got an inkling on that other person on the line, have an inkling of who that might be, and you give out information. But that's another thing that only a couple of them did talk about confidentiality, but all of them did not. And that's what I was saying, across the board. They need the exact same thing.
Liability.
Yeah. Liability. If you get that person the wrong thing, supposing you say, oh, well, you need to do this, you need to stand up to your boss, and I lose my job. They're not required to have insurance. So if I can't sue you, that's horrible.
And so there's a lot. See, and that's why I if I insist something for a person, it's that, you know, you should have some joy. I know, because I know that you cannot survive in constant turmoil. You cannot thrive in that. So I will say that, you know, that is my hope for you. But then there are other things that, you know, when it comes to what a person should do with a job. Or case in point, a type of advice I would give is, if a person is telling me, you know, I'm around these people on a regular basis and they just make me feel horrible. I'm going to tell them, if they're the ones that makes you feel horrible, then you should separate yourself from them. Because you don't deserve to feel that way. You know, that's the type of thing I'll promote.
And it's a line, like I said, again, I don't have a problem with life coaches. I just think they should be regulated and trained professionally. I think they should be trained in here, and they should have cohesive training.
Right.
Not all of these people who are now get it online And when you pull it up, life coach, you're gonna pull up so many ads before you actually get to something of substance.
And it just should not be that way. Particularly, it's like commercializing mental health, and that is a part. So there are people who are in it because they have a passion for peers, and they do it. And I believe that the vast majority of clinicians, they do that. Listen, those people do not get on that road and do that kind of traveling and get on those act teams and go out to people's houses in the middle of the night because that's just a job.
Yeah.
They do that because they have a passion for it.
Yeah.
But, in any of it, like I said, it's just not perfect. Even in my areas, I think there's some liabilities.
Definitely some liabilities because, like I said, the training of the life coach is not cohesive. It's not clear of what it should be. When I read that you should be taking KPIs is a business term. I'm a business person. I do KPIs.
Right. That's
I do
goals.
metrics, those type things. When we start injecting that into people's lives, because you can set these goals and hit these goals without, I would say, making it clinical. It's too much.
And that's at least from my experience and my understanding in mental health, that's not a term that a clinician or a peer would take and use with the person that they're interacting with, because they're not a machine. It's more of a different type of interaction. That person will have some goals. And with the therapist and the psychiatrist is probably not even going to set that. The therapist may help that person set some treatment goals, but then again, I would help that person. If that person decides, hey, you know what, I want to be an artist, I want to get back into poetry, I want to write a book, then I would help them. If they don't know how to do the research, okay, well, let's go to the library and figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah, and another thing about the life coach, and we'll get back to the pros and cons, but one thing I wanted to say is, and it's different levels. So like I said, when I was wanted to be in management, your life coach is where you want to go, right? So then you want to be a director, that's where you go. You want to be a gypsy. I wouldn't have someone in AI and I really want to be a gypsy or a musician.
Right.
You have to find your dynamics of what a life coach is and how. And then I think you also have to go in there knowing exactly what you want to walk out with. That's one thing Angie said. She was hesitant about having a life coach, but she walked in with exactly what she wanted. She got it, and she walked out. She didn't need it anymore. She walked out.
I will say this. So when I was first, given this opportunity to interact, I knew I had a general idea, but I really wasn't able to articulate it exactly. And one of the things that she helped me do is step me through a process that helped me define it clearly. So she didn't tell it to me. She asked me a series of questions that made me think about it. And I said, And then after we went through these series of questions, we were able to construct a whole statement. But see, that's skill and training.
See, but that's also on the person that's needing the life coach. Not everybody is inquisitive like you and I. So you and I are inquisitive, even in relationships. I'm going to ask enough questions where I can walk away with this huge picture of what it is that this person can provide for me, and does it equal the questions that I have for myself. And not everyone has that.
That's right.
And that goes back that life coaches is excellent, but even with us, we need to read enough articles so we can choose the right person for us.
So knowing at least so even if you don't know exactly, you have to have some idea because if you don't, you're right, you're not going to get anything from that coach.
And I think they're also excellent to pair with even with mental health, the mental health community. If an individual has, is seeing a counselor or a therapist, then you could couple that with a life coach.
And you can, and that goes to agree with you even more. Like I said, just recently coming to understand epigenetics. So understanding how, like, case in point, as it relates to me, how trauma can affect you on a cellular level. That when you come into things like that, that's not something that requires a single prong approach. You know what I mean? It affects, like for me, when I get stressed out, I have physical illness. My body is physically shutting down. I have migraine headaches. Oh my God, it can be almost incapacitating, but it's not. People tend to think of it as a mind thing. So in that case, a therapist, life coach, having your medical professionals on board,
Yeah.
that is a
It work
harmony of something. So I think that there's a benefit in kind of doing the research, but it goes all to advocating for yourself and understanding what you need. And if we're not connected to our needs, we can't go. If we go in there saying they told me this and they said I should have it, we're giving all of our power over to them, and we don't recognize that we have the ability to define what we want and take that responsibility for ourselves so that we can make a decision. As a life coach or a therapist.
Definitely. The next one, and this would fall back on what I said about Dr. Heavenly. She's seeing a life coach for anger management, medication.
Yeah, see,
medical and medication issues. Where does that, life coach can't do anything for you.
She's not going to be able
can't even make the suggestion.
And she's not going to be able to just manage anger issues with medication alone.
No.
She's going to need coping skills. And I know about that because there are times when I got the toolbox. When I first learned about peer support, I learned about the toolbox. And you go through a situation, you open up your toolbox, and you think about the skills that you have to use.
Yeah.
Then there are days where I'm so pissed off, I don't want to use anything in that toolbox. I'm going to beat somebody with the toolbox. You know what I mean? And so that's where the point where you have to have coping skills.
You do. And then you have to, that life coach also have to know, to have enough gumption, I would say, old school word, to actually pull from you. When are you having these anger management issues? Remember with mine. Mine was during my cycle, stress, so, a lot of different things. So that's one big thing. The other one, another huge one, suicide.
Yeah.
Because some people can give you advice, and especially if you pulling those KPIs, if you're not hitting those targets, you be like, well, damn.
Yeah, see, but why? And so what that does is it puts you in a position where you're on somebody else's timetable, and that's not recovery focused, because recovery is personal. Recovery is personal to every individual.
Yeah,
it's person focused, it's person centered, it's unique. Nobody gives it to you.
And some people think that hard love is for everybody, and it is not.
No,
it is not.
No.
I know one day I was meeting with my mentor, and I had on an outfit, and I'm shapely or whatever, but he was like, when I walked in, he was like, what is that you got on? I was like, this is just what he said. Listen, if you want to go to the next level, that's not for you. You're already voluptuous, and men don't hire women, because men run business. They don't hire women they want to fuck.
And that's it.
They don't.
That is,
but I could take that, and he had enough of my personality. Yeah. Another woman would take that and go inside. Even with me, with my weave, and I'm talking about all this other stuff, a lot of people get offended by that.
But part of it is that, the offense I would have in that is the fact that a person, any man, any employer would have the audacity to say that.
He wasn't my employer though. He was just my mentor.
A mentor, okay, but that's still, it's patriarchy. It is
the way. But that's the world that we live in.
It is the way it is. But again, it's something that I hate. You know what I mean? And I hate that it's true. I do hate that. But I've also seen women women that wear things like that. They get certain types of positions. There's certain types of positions they get put into.
Well, see, and then women are not being really, especially women are not really comfortable with being androgynous. And in our community, we associate being androgynous with being gay.
Well, it is true. So, it is true, too. And think about, like, the attire. I used to see some of the women come to work in where we worked at together.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff, listen, when you go into work, that is not the place for your stilettos. I mean, who wears stilettos in the office? Like, what? Right, like, no, I mean, that's just weird. I mean, I don't know, maybe if you're like, I don't know. It's just, some of that stuff is a little bit extreme to me. It's just, to me, my opinion, it's whatever.
Yeah,
but,
and then the next one is just what you said earlier, self-care.
Yeah.
Self-care, because remember, I know one of the things I said years ago was like, I remember when I was a social worker, they didn't have to see a psychiatrist or, therapist, really. I'm saying psychiatrist, but therapist. Suggestion for counseling was not that. Now, even social workers, it's suggested because you take in so much of the world we live in. The world becomes more difficult. So people will say the world is going down. No, it's not. It's we are more caring than we've ever been. But the more people on this earth, the more chaos you're going to have, just because we're what are we, what, 9 billion or some crazy
last
number
I
like
checked, it was 7. So I would imagine
7
that was
billion,
that was a
7
couple
billion.
years ago though.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. You know, but and I think it's true for not just mental health field. It's true for most fields, for law enforcement. I remember meeting when I lived in Duluth.
Definitely.
I remember speaking with a Duluth police officer. He was telling me, he was a veteran. He was telling me, well, yeah, they said I got PTSD, but I don't believe it. So you walking around on the street with a gun, you got PTSD,
I don't believe
and you
it.
don't even believe
He
it.
needed a life
Meanwhile,
coach.
your job is to police me.
Yeah.
Sir, I'm going to need you to address that. I'm just saying, I'm not, I can say that because I got it too. If I got it, you can. If I got it and I can get help, then damn it, you can too.
True.
Especially if
Very
your
true.
job is to carry around a gun. You know what I'm
definitely.
saying? But it's, and none of the professions though, there's really no requirement. They don't make police officers, you know, the stuff they deal with is that, I mean, they see a lot of traumatic stuff.
They do.
Everybody, you
Well,
know.
everyone, we're going to break, and we will come back, and you guys can finish listening to Deliberately and Rebel Queen.
You're listening to IBNX. IBNXradio.com.
This is Deliberately, and I want to invite you to listen to Dynamics of Dialogue. On Dynamics of Dialogue, we're going to take the road less traveled. We're going to speak on topics that mainstream media is afraid to talk about. Every Sunday from 1 to 3 on IBNX Radio Network. Hey guys, we are back. So we're winding up, but we do still want to put out a few things. So everybody know, I told Rebel Queen, hey, I want to kind of throw in a little something with AI that actually helps us. Since it impacts so much of our life, I think we need to know about it. We're talking about life coaches and actually just getting help from mental health professionals versus life coaches. So one of the things that Rebel Queen and I were actually talking about was the groups in social media for like mental health. Mm-hmm. And if you could, Rebel.
I was talking about this article I was reading on Facebook, and I'm always reading, and I try to make sure I'm looking at credible news sources. Mm-hmm. But this one lady was talking about her experience, and she was in a secret group on Facebook, and she had just left an abusive relationship and had escaped to a shelter, and she apparently was on her phone, and she had made a post in this secret group with some suicidal ideations. Apparently somebody in that group became concerned and reported it to Facebook because, as you know, Facebook has you can report that. They actually have a path that you can follow to say this person is suicidal. And apparently, the police showed up at the shelter. Yeah, and that was an unregistered. She no one had her address. But she
probably had her GPS on.
Yeah, exactly.
And
not
then
only
Facebook is pulling so much data.
They can find you through your. When I worked in the forensic part of the work I did in app support is that when somebody would commit fraud and we would have to find them and find the IP addresses, it's from those IP addresses that they can. That's like the same as your physical address.
It is, and it's like a fingerprint too.
It's your fingerprint.
So it's so close to go in there, and then they can narrow it down when the person was posting and all of the information. Facebook pulls is something we need to probably be concerned about because they're in the news right now. Mark just went before court. The other thing is that I found a lot of apps. So if you cannot afford a life coach and you're not big on actually speaking to somebody in mental health because you don't consider what issue you have as mental health, there are a multitude of apps that you can download on your phone called life coaches. They say save hundreds of dollars, but you can log on to these apps on your phone and actually put in your goals and deal with these on a daily basis as you hit your goals, whatever that is, to lose weight, get an education, buy a new car, survive keeping your grandchildren, whatever it is. You can actually put that in the apps and actually track your goals. But also, because one of my things is that I definitely want to get over, I do not have an issue with life coaches. I have an issue with the regulation of life coaches. There is an app for anyone who decided they want to be a life coach. And it's actually called, I think it's True Life Apps. And basically what it is a app for life coaches to give them information on, well, first of all, it helps them keep up with their clients, right? Mm-hmm. And as they're keeping up with their clients, it gives them information on making sure they hit these boundaries. Some of the pros and cons that you and I went over, making sure that they don't go over certain things in the pro and cons. I think it may have something to do also with like liability. That's probably going to be the biggest thing that it touch on, liability, because that's the only thing I think that may go outside of state regulations, that they can actually look at what information they're giving to the people and what they should and say, can and cannot say. Then they would, and then you're just going to keep all your patients, or I don't think you would call them patients, your clients, all your clients' information in this app. And it's, I think it would be benefit for them.
The only thing is when you...
It's in the app?
I was on board. You talk about keeping the client's information in the app. Because, they're not good. We're not good with consumer protections and keeping, I just see data leaks and breaches and all that.
Yeah, but then think about it. You would get that
we get it everywhere.
For the most,
but,
most
also
part.
to complement what you're saying, there's also apps on the other side, too, right? Opposed to life coaching apps. Some of the apps I use are mood tools and fear tools. Mood tools tracks your depression, and fear tools tracks your anxiety. So if you're a person that, if you're questioning, saying, okay, well, I feel like this is an issue, I'm not sure, I'm not really comfortable with seeing a therapist yet, how do I know if I need to? You can use these tools. It asks you the standard, and I know there's a set of questions that they ask. The standard assessment questions. It asks you the standard assessment questions, and it tracks the history that you put in of what your score is. And then after some time, you can look at that data and make a decision. And you can even take it and show it to the therapist when you do go. So those are ways. There's always ways. Apps are good. There are lots of things you can use.
And then you know what? I would also imagine that with that AI technology, it's pulling down other information that's associated with some of the criteria you're putting in there to kind of help you as well, to guide you. I have seen one, because I think you mentioned that before. One of them also will give you one of those apps I saw has like a GPS connected to it. It also gives you professionals in your area. And if I remember right, because I haven't been on that app in about 3 or 4 months, but I think it also had life coaches in there as well. So, those things, and also gave insurance information in there. So there's just a lot of different information that you can get out there to kind of help.
It is
help you where you need to basically be.
The one thing I just want to say before we do wrap up is that I just want, for anybody out there that's considering help, I just don't want you to look at it in terms of you don't have control over what happens to you once you seek help, because you do, and there's a way that you can advocate for yourself, and primarily it's going to come from just researching and reading up. Talking to different professionals, get a second opinion if you have to. But, people should know that you don't have to accept what a life coach says. You don't have to accept what the doctor says. There's nothing that's absolute. I've had a friend in this very studio that lives with schizophrenia, and he does not take medication. He used his knowledge through his many master's degrees to help him decide what works for him, and it works. He is actually the person that taught my CPS training. The sky is the limit.
It is. It is. Because with me, I don't think a life coach would be so best for me, because I work so. I would need the medical profession, so that's a decision that I would choose. The life coach area, I'm the kind of person, I hit all targets myself, and then plus I live raw, so I don't know at what point they taking what I'm telling them and they going back masturbating for it. Those are concern I have. Somebody getting off on shit I'm saying. You don't ever think about that?
Oh God, no, I'm gonna. Actually, you know what? I don't ever talk about stuff like that. I don't.
You don't.
I don't.
What are life coaches for?
But I should, because there are things that they talk about.
Sexual health is connected to mental health.
It is absolutely important.
Yeah.
But I don't talk about it, and I ain't gonna talk about it on the air, so you ain't even gonna know what the problem is. So and.
But everybody, I agree with you. And then you know what it does at the end of the day, just to kind of like wrap up, it just make us a better society. And that's what I do love, because at one time we wasn't trying to get help. And so we got all of these crazies running around, and a lot of the mass murderers, if they would have, a majority of them, and it's going all the way back to Bundy and all of them, had they just received some type of help. Because think about it, the rapist guy, wasn't it Ted Bundy? So he had a law degree.
So, but here's the thing. So the statistics say now that we understand, lots with these mass murderers, they make it a mental health issue. And the reality is that it's really not necessarily a mental health issue. One factor that they do find in common is that these mass murderings in America, they're white males, and they're domestic violence. In almost every one of these cases, these men have been physical abusers of the women in their lives. So that reflects more on anger.
Or they grew up in a physical abusive
house. Or they
house.
could have grew up, right. But because the unfortunate thing is that people with mental health challenges are painted. In reality, lots of times, the biggest challenge is about conditions like bipolar and depression is suicide. You know, that's more people with mental health challenges are more at risk to harm themselves than someone else. So, you know,
they probably, what they would probably have is, I don't know if is growing up in an abusive household, is that a mental health issue?
It's a trauma. And it contributes to, like when we talked about A scores, it is
one of the questions.
It is. It's an adversity, yeah. So I bet you if you looked at some of these people, they are dealing with pretty high A scores, or at least significant, because they say anything over a 4 is what puts you at risk, you know, in your adult life. I think it's over a 4.
Yeah. So in your opinion, then, life coach, could a person that grew up with that?
No.
They still need to get
I don't think
some
because I think if a person grew up with trauma, I think it depends, because I don't think that every person that has anger issues had trauma. Because I think it could be so.
Anger issues, like we said, it would also be hormones, that type of things. It could be society. It could also be society as well.
Loss of lots of things. Some people
definitely loss.
In some of those cases, some of these are people who have, you know, experienced significant loss.
Correct.
And that changes, you know.
Correct. So, guys, thank you for joining. We enjoyed speaking with you. We will be back next Sunday, Dynamics of Dialogue, from 1300, 1 o'clock
1 to 3.
military. I got to do the military term. 1300 to 1500, 1 to 3, every Sunday, Dynamics of Dialogues. Bye.
You're supposed to tell the people to get this.